Welcome to Living with FASD. I'm your host, Patty Casper, and this week's Candid Conversation is with Jodee Kulp, who's going to be sharing the backstory behind so many of the books that she's written about FASD. Then you can open the show notes, find the link to vote in the Women in Podcasting Awards. It's People's Choice, which means I can't win my category of society and culture without your help. So please take a few moments and help me win in that category, because that's going to bring more awareness of the show and therefore about fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. I know we all want to see that happen. Vote for only one podcast or all your votes will get tossed. In the meantime, just sit back and enjoy this candid conversation with Ms. Jodee Kulp. Oh, welcome back to another episode of Living with FASD, or Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder. This week, I am joined at the mic once again by my BFF, Jodee Kulp, who is beloved in the FASD community for many reasons that we've talked about before. And we really want to celebrate her latest book, Embracing Zak. Jodee, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, always a pleasure to have you on the mic. Can you hold up your book for a quick second so people can see it? Yeah, see the award sticker on there. You've gotten a lot of really positive feedback. What are you hearing, Jodee?
I'm hearing it's a weekend read. Don't plan on doing anything else. Once you get in, you're stuck. That people have read it all night long. I guess that's good. And that's on the front end of it. But then I think the back end is, that these characters, I want to go live in that town. I want to be part of that community. That part of that community has become part of me. Those characters have become my friends. And I want to carry on. And that's what this is all about, right? It's about building awareness to people that don't understand neurodiversity and don't realize that their community is filled with people with differences and different neurology, and that they're good people and they have got real lives, and they have real lives that they're probably rubbing shoulders with every day. So that is really good. And I think the third piece is, I didn't want it to end. I, I want another book. I want to know what happened. And so I say to them, well, what do you want to happen? What are you hoping for? Kind of an author spoiler kind of thing. But, what is their curiosity? And, it won't happen immediately. Obviously, this book took 20 years from the sequel, the prequel to it. It's 20 years later. But yeah, so I'm excited. I am, getting the award for Best Book of Excellence for Diversity and Inclusion. That was a big one. Mom's Choice for Young Adult and Adult Fiction. That was big to pull those two off. I have not entered any contest for libraries, but that is my plan now in the spring, is to pick some library thing, because I really want it available to everybody. Amazon and Booksby is where we have it right now. For those that are boycotting Amazon, Booksby, Jodee Kulp has the books.
Yeah. So, and I did the same thing with Sip by Sip. So we each have a tagline. So it's books.by,
Yes.
/ and then for me, it's your FASD coach. For you, it is
Jodee Kulp.
Okay. Is there an underscore between Jodee and Kulp?
Jodee-Kulp. It may be. I can send you that, and you can put it at the bottom of the podcast if you want.
Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah. And Amazon has it as an ebook and a audiobook, which we did virtual. So I think, Patty, you've listened to the virtual. I've listened to it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I didn't want it to end, which is the exact same experience I had the first time I read through the transcript. I was blessed that you entrusted me for feedback throughout the writing process. And I would echo all three of those points that you brought up, that it was something that I didn't want to put down, that I wanted to be able to keep reading until I was done with, that I did not want the story to end, that I wanted it to continue, that I felt like these were people I knew. And Jodee, that really is the genius of your writing, because with FASD affecting 1 in 20, what that means is that every person walking the planet knows several people who are impacted by the effects of prenatal alcohol exposure and just don't recognize it.
And we have all these people and all these organizations that list all the neurodiversity pieces, and FASD is not there. I'm like, where is it? I'm taking a certification for my life coaching and health coaching on neurodiversity so that I'll be neurodiversity certified. And the first chapter of my work was to know all the neurodiversity pieces, and they are missing FASD. And I'm like, you have got to be kidding. Well, I'm going to complete the class. I'm going to graduate and get a good score. Then I'll make them a note.
Yeah, yeah.
Not,
But
not
I
going to make any waves right now. I'm
the
sorry.
genius of what you've done, Jodee, is the way you developed your characters was without any descriptors that could paint a picture of what each character looked like.
Yeah.
And so everyone puts bodies, their own imagination onto those characters.
Yeah.
And
And
they
some,
become real. And they become known and loved. That really is absolute genius on your
and
part.
sometimes you learn, I gave a lot of time for you to develop your own characters in your head because I think visualizing your characters is part of your heart to the people. And there are, like Margie, you can kind of figure out as she's cooking on her Friday special breakfast, and then Sam, being Santa Claus during the holiday season. So there are a couple glimmers there that give you a little inkling, but no, I didn't want, and in both cases I wanted them to have their own opinion and then maybe have to change it, right? Because oh, well, that's different, but maybe it isn't different. Maybe maybe it isn't about, race here. Maybe it's not about ethnicity or what we look at. Maybe it's about how our brains work.
Mhm.
And yeah, I did that on purpose.
Yeah, yeah. And it really was genius. You are a prolific writer when it comes to books about FASD, whether it's nonfiction or fiction. What got you started writing in the first place? Why did you become an author?
I never planned it. I tripped over the first book, and the second book I argued and argued and argued in prayer about not wanting to do it. So the first book, I was dealing with my own childhood, dealing with the fact that I had grown up with parents that drank, became sober, but not during my time living as a child there. But they ended up with 35 years of restoring our family and sobriety. So that was like an awesome thing. But while I worked through my own childhood angst, I wrote poetry, art therapy kind of thing, poetry, and drew pictures. And they were on my desk in my office. And one of my customers came by and was snooping. Well, no, he wasn't. My desk was pretty open to anybody, unless it was confidential stuff. And then it was in a box.
Yeah.
But he was saying, this poetry is really good. I want to publish this. And I'm like, you what? And he said, yeah, I want to, I'll print this for you. And it wasn't very big. It was a book of about maybe 40 pages. So it's just, a small book. But what it did is to take the journey of understanding that, you shut the door on your childhood and you don't want to look at it, and then opening that door and walking through it until you get to the point where you're embracing your family again and saying, hey, I love you, you know. And so I had a few of them, got me on Oprah Winfrey. It's kind of crazy. Hazelton published it later, which was kind of cool, and now I own the book rights. So
Yeah.
we've got a surprise coming up, don't we, Patty?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll circle back to that
Yeah.
at the end of our conversation.
So
But
the next book, I was going to share that with you, the next book is this book.
yeah.
And it's got a little guy on it.
Mm.
And that book, we were foster parents and had an allegation. And I had a million questions because that's who I am. I'm, I'm Zak in the book, right? And asking a million questions and making people crazy. Um, and I couldn't find the answers. And of course, there was no internet at that time. So, answers had to go with the people. And, I had, and it's not a situation the professionals really want to talk about because they don't want their name out there. But if some crazy mom was willing to put her name out there, they were willing to give me the information. So I had judges on my team, people in charge of the Children's Defense Fund, child welfare. I had all the top people, and they were giving me the answers that they couldn't share, but they wanted to be shared. Now it was written in 1991, 92, so it's not a new book, but it's got all the protocol in it that's still pretty, real.
Yeah.
And it was,
It allegations are so terrifying.
oh,
Whether you're a birth family, foster family, adoptive family, that's got to be one of the worst things you can go through, to be accused of hurting or neglecting a child that you love, that you're responsible for. And with our population, having a child whose neurology is different, who responds to the world differently, sees the world differently, doesn't do things in the expected manner, really opens up that vulnerability to
it
more
does.
allegations.
And I found that when Liz was in the hospital, I was just looking at medical records. And this was very interesting because it said mother is very passive. Now, I am not a passive person. That would be like not something you would ever, without a snapshot, ever know. But we were basically locked in a room during COVID. Liz's kidneys had failed. She was going to have surgery to get a heart catheter. She needed some normalcy. They'd taken away all the food that she loved, and she's still on a really tough diet. So, I have a kid that is real, wheels on wheels, as I say, and my job is to keep her calm enough to get through this. And so, what am I going to do? I'm going to bring my energy down as low and slow as possible to make sure that she can draw some of my energy and feel like she can get through this as a person with real strong neurodiversity. And to read that, 5 years later in the medical records, I'm like, oh, isn't that interesting? Again, a
And
snapshot of one human being and one family without having any idea that the writing they write down could have a trajectory in the
yeah,
future for
yeah.
many
And
other.
and really shape the way people interact with you because of that uninformed
Yeah.
assessment.
Yeah. Now, the
Um,
next time we had COVID, and we had a person being very overt and very dynamic with us, I couldn't hold back. I went out and I said, "Excuse me," and I went out in the lobby and in the hall and had a energetic discussion. It didn't look like a passive mother at that point.
Sounds like a euphemism.
Well, they're probably
Energetic.
expletives that they were saying after I had the discussion. But yeah, a training session on what neurodiversity and fetal alcohol was, because,
Mhm.
my job as a parent was to establish the atmosphere, the environment.
So that they could do their jobs,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
so they could do their pieces
Yeah,
and collectively work for her health.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So families at risk, how was that received by the community? It's been out for what, over 30 years at this point.
I mean, I went to Australia and taught on it for 3 weeks
Oh
in
my
community
goodness.
and did a full 5-day training session on it. That was on 9/11, so I ended up getting stuck in Australia, and Lizzie was home because her daddy had gone to Alaska to shoot photography. And we had a person there, but they were not ready for Liz for more than 24 hours. And
Oh no.
I know. And I arrived, and she had, of course, there was no communication. I arrived, week and I think 10 days later. It was a mess. I came home to well, disaster wouldn't exactly put it into the right context. But let's just say that at that point, with a 14-year-old, our life totally changed. And the person that we had caring was, and we had two people. Neither of them were possibly, it was just way more than what
Yeah.
anybody could handle.
They never said yes again.
No, no. In fact, I've written legislation. I've written legislation because of allegations on standby caregiver, where you could choose a non-blood relative to care for your child. And the people that wrote the legislation with me, I said, well, you guys will be, you'll sign up for me, right? And they looked at me and they laughed. And they said, not with your kid, I'm not. No way. So here we'd walked for months getting this legislation, which became national and international. And I did not have anybody to
Wow.
do the job.
So, so many of your books are award winning. Did that one, Families at Risk, get
I
any official recognition?
No, I didn't know anything about it. I mean, I had a full staff and we were doing, we had editors and things on our staff, and I wrote it and didn't really do anything with it. I mean, it just kind of took off on its own, a whole different kind of lifestyle than happens now. But yeah. And then Lizzie, to go to the next book, says to me one day, she says, Mom, you make money with your book, don't you? Well, tell you what, guys, you really don't make money with your books. You just don't. But if you've got a message to get out there, it's worthy of doing it. So she says, Mom, I want to write a book. I want to make money like you do. And I'm like, no, the kid can't write. She can't spell, and she's not reading yet. We're just starting homeschool, and public school. She was just too complicated for public school. So this and is what came out. I don't know if I can help it. Let's see. Got it? So
Um,
there. Okay. So it's the best I can be.
oh,
And
there we go.
living with FASD, the best I can be is what it was.
Yeah.
And she originally, I said, okay, let's figure out how your brain works. So that's what we did. We wrote on recipe cards at homeschool, and I wrote them down. I wrote her answers, and she was very candid and told me everything that she believed in, or how she experienced life. And then she wrote from the recipe cards every one of the pages. And I don't know if I can show you, but it's not the page you want. But let's see, right? I can see right here. Oh, it is so hard. Anyway, the part that she wrote, which is the handwriting part, she copied, and she did a great job on it. I mean, that little book has done better than any of our books. And we had actually we did it in 2000, and then we did it in 2004, and then we did it again in 2013 and 2017. And then in 2022, she and I were working on adding her part to it before she got very, very, very sick and didn't have access to her arms or legs or anything but her core. And I put it aside. I just, you asked me to pull up some of these books, and I realized that we have all the editing done from 2022 with her words, that we can republish it. I was like, whoa. And she and I also did the same with our fascinating journey. We worked on that one, and then
Yeah,
she
I have that one.
really sick. And I guess what I would do there if I revise it is simply put current footnotes in it, obviously the material began as a case notes, because to do homeschool with someone before they think of neuroplasticity and before they're deciding that occupational therapy will work for our kids, and before they're looking at processes that are common now, I've got to write notes and case notes and try to figure out what connects to what. And
And to
luckily I had
justify all the services.
and we fought it. I mean, for years through each of these things, I'd go to a conference and people would say, they'd be up there presenting a part of my book to try to prove it wrong. And, I'm not going to say sadly, but thankfully, the pieces that worked for Liz were able to be duplicated for other kids. And it takes someone, that's not afraid to get muddy and dirty and to speak out, to be able to give the researchers an opportunity to do the case studies, to do this is anecdotal. But to make
You
it,
were spearheading the Nothing About Us Without Us movement.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then in 2007, that's exactly what we did. We did a camp for adults and teens, and that was wonderful. And we followed all the rules and all the regulations that they'd done for years. And the second day out, my adults who knew me said, "We're going home. We don't want to be part of your camp. Your camp is treating us like babies. We're not babies. We have our own adult lives." And so I said to them, I said, "Okay, you stay up all night long
Mhm.
and figure out a new camp. And if you present me a new camp when I wake up, I just might accept it." So that's what they did. They stayed up all night and came up with ideas of their own. And there wasn't one idea that I wouldn't have agreed to. And I told them their voice was valuable and important. So it kind of began a lot of the opportunity for the adults to walk on their own 2 feet and not be treated if they were diagnosed, right? A lot of us are not diagnosed. So we just went on marching with our lives. But
Right.
if they were diagnosed, treated like children, and that was a big, huge step.
Yeah, I spoke with a young woman yesterday who, wasn't sure if she was ready to share her story on the podcast or not, but that she was diagnosed in late adolescence, and that was the response of her mother was to shelter, overprotect, and prevent her from living life,
Yeah. Yeah.
for a long while. And so there's such wisdom in what you did and breaking those invisible chains,
Yeah.
and really challenging the notion of what is disability. Is it, do you focus on the negative or do you focus on the positives, on the abilities, on the
Exactly.
strengths, interests, talents, because we all have them.
Yeah. Exactly. The first day of
Yeah.
school for Liz, we took a learning disabled book and I gave her a red pen and I said, "Find all the disses in this book and let's cross them out because they're not going to be in our school." And it was all about abilities. Let's go figure out what you can do. Let's build on the can do, not the can't do.
Yeah.
And it's surprisingly, many of the can't do's, a brain does what a brain's capable of doing. So as we developed the brain with neuroplasticity, and as we built it developmentally in a congregate way, so if there was one side that was lower level, that was the side we worked on first, right? We gently worked on that to build that developmental up, so that we started balancing this circle, which originally looked like mountains and caves and all kinds of
Yeah.
things. And as we filled in pieces, life just connected for her. Now, was she always wheels on wheels? Oh yeah, even in the medical field, that ask them. But but she had a reason for it. And if you sat down and listened or talked to her, you found she was very deep and
Mhm.
very precious. Yeah, very precious.
Mhm.
Yeah, and she would change your thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that book was, what year did you write My Fascinating Journey?
I finished it in 2000. I had a case note study in a spiral bound in 2001 because we'd pretty much started finishing school. And I wrote it from 2001 to 2004 and then finished it in 2004 as spiral or wire bound and then printed it, I believe, in 2007 or 8
Okay.
and
So that's
reprinted.
about the time you started on the Whitest Wall, isn't it?
Oh, it is. Yes, I'd gotten that one done and I started on the whitest wall because I believed that we really needed a story that people could connect to, that had characters that were real
Yeah.
and so I at that point took race and faith and expose them in a way that was really happening because I live in the urban area and we did 35 kids. They'd be in our yard, 16 kids would go to church on Sundays in my minivan. They would pack in. I mean, you couldn't make, I wish I was making it up, but I sometimes look like a clown car going to church. We were close, so it wasn't like I had to drive on the freeway or anything. But
Mhm.
yeah, so I understood these kids and because I was Miss Jodee and I was the one that they'd come and share their angst with and share their truth with. And as a blue-eyed person, I didn't see what they were experiencing until I experienced it through their eyes and their hearts and on my porch. And then once my eyes were open, I started looking at it. So that was race and faith because we can see that. but we can't see fetal alcohol. So if I could show something of how two sides, churches, different churches, Catholic Church on one side of the road, Lutheran Church on the other, and and there's a big street going through. Well, that's happens in small towns, excuse me. And so they could understand that. And in suburbia, you've got different ethnicities that are misunderstood and have people that do things without even thinking about it that are offensive. So that's what I did in that book. And that's how the catalyst came 20 years later for
So,
Embracing Zak.
yeah, so for the audience, the same characters in Whitest Wall, many of them are alive and well on paper, they're alive and well 20 years older
Yeah,
in Embracing Zak.
yeah,
Same
yeah.
community, same, but yeah, which is really fascinating. And so people just getting to know you, Jodee, if they start reading Embracing Zak and then backtrack to The Whitest Wall, which is the order that I had read your works in, it was so neat to say, oh, getting that backstory, right, was really neat. And that's what we do when we meet people in life.
That's true.
We
Yes.
develop relationships with them in the present. And then as the friendships deepen and stories are shared, we learn the backstories,
Yeah, that's
right?
true.
We learn
That's
the
true.
histories. And
Yeah.
so that was kind of neat. And that was another book that I didn't want to put down and I didn't want it to end.
Oh.
So it was really cool to have an ending that I could look forward to because I knew what happened 20 years down the road.
People kept writing to me over the years saying, "Can't you just finish the book?" Well, I had life happen. I broke my back, and then Lizzie got sick, and then she got sicker, and then she got sicker, and yeah, there was just not a moment
Life
um, to
happens.
write it, And I actually had the third book already. I mean, I had the sequel to that, Whitest Wall, three-quarters done and ready to go because I was going to nail it, every 2 years put one out, but life gets in the way. That's
Yeah.
just the way life is. And
So that's another thing, another thing to tease out there is that right after you finished Whitest Wall, you started writing the chronological sequel, which was Tiger Butterfly, which of course I had never heard of until I was working with you on Embracing Zak. And it's like, you looked at your notes and realized I'm 95% done with this book. Knowing the way you've been working with these fictional books as opposed to all your nonfiction books, you're addressing social issues as well as the FASD, which I think is just a remarkable gift to society. So tell me about Tiger Butterfly and what's going on with the characters there. What are you wanting to help our broader culture work through with this particular installment of your series?
a tiger butterfly is about secrets and secrets that hold you back and may hold other people back because of your secrets. And it's about keeping your mouth shut when you should have opened it. Silence is not always golden. So that is what Tiger Butterfly really deals with. And yeah, I'm not going to go any further on that. And then the next book is Different Beats, and that is about a baby that's born with FASD, unknown to, of course, anybody, especially the parents that adopt him. And the adoptive father is a forensic psychologist who's in the first book, and his wife is a child developmental specialist. And again, this is before a lot of this we totally understood it, and not knowing what's going on. Yeah, this little guy is wheels on wheels like mine were, and he creates quite the commotion in the suburban community, and ties in with a little bit of the native community that is living in silence in the small town of Riverdale, where nobody knew that, they had lived there for centuries and centuries. And Yeah, so it's kind of a cross-pathing there of differences and people that understood what was going on to be able to expose and help these professionals, these boots on the ground people, help the professionals go to that next step to be able to care for this little person who then becomes
And
uh,
and that's such an important piece because working in foster care and adoption, I heard so often complaints of families that I was supporting. My kid is worse thanks to counseling. And having to gently remind parents, I'm so sorry you had that disappointing, that aggravating, that sometimes infuriating experience, but nobody knew what they didn't know until they learned it. And if you go to where people are trained to be counselors, to be social workers, to be doctors, to be child development workers, they're not going to learn about FASD if there's nobody at those schools who knows about it.
or diagnosed or parents that, yeah, it's really the parents that create the chat lines and the internet connections. And that's how we originally got together was, over the internet way back in the 1990s. We were part of the Gopher system, which of course I don't even know if that exists anymore, but now there's Facebook and, you
Yeah,
know, all kinds of other things, messaging and whatever.
yeah.
So
I think they were forums back
they
then.
were forums. They were
Yeah,
forums. Yeah.
yeah. So Whitest Wall dealt with racism, which I think is just as important a topic now as it had been then, if not more so.
Well, it was revealed, right? The
Yeah,
things that my kids were saying in 2004 to 2006 was revealed in the 2020s. So, that yeah, the case was made back then with this book because I was enmeshed in it. I was part of it. I was in families that have multiracial children or, rainbow families are definitely understanding, the work that was done in that book.
yeah.
Yeah. So
And
I like social initiatives, I
yeah,
like taking a cause and saying, no, let's really dig into this.
yeah. And I
And
know Tiger Butterfly tackles, in addition to secrets and how detrimental they can be, it tackles anti-Semitism,
it does.
which, just like the racism, is a huge issue for today's point in time and things that we are wrestling with as a culture. Even if we don't understand how central, how core of an issue it is,
Yeah.
and that tendency to other
Yeah.
people.
Well, and Lizzie has brought that to my attention. She was in her first group home and we were on the phone one day and she said, "Mom, did you know I'm an other?" I said, "You're what?" She said, "I'm an other." She said, I go, "What do you mean you're an other?" She said, "Well, if we're going to go on an errand, I thought we'd like go stop at the coffee shop or hang out or like we do, Mom, just like normal. But they'd say, 'Oh, we'll have to take the others today. Maybe we should take the others with us.'" She said, and they weren't talking about themselves. They were talking about us. So I guess I'm another. I'm like, oh my heart, oh my heart, right? So yeah, those things need to be exposed because if you're isolated from this issue, and I chose murder or not murder. Well, there's a murder in it that that gets solved 20 years
Yeah,
later,
yeah.
but
There's a hint of mystery in everything that you write.
well,
That's
and that's what I want. Mystery
yeah,
is something people like.
yeah,
It's not written for females or males. It's written for both. My characters are strong on both sides.
yeah,
Uh, the teenagers can read them and hopefully skip some of their early adult transition stuff that they would normally do. Yeah,
yeah.
that's
All right. So what got you writing, picking up your pen again, your fictional pen and doing Zak 20 years down the road?
I'm in the middle of medical trauma. I mean, just huge medical. situation, and I had been working on an FASD documentary as a FASD consultant, and my co-partner, I guess, in this is Joel Chagrin, who is incredible, and his friend Justin Overlander, who was working on the first two seasons of The Chosen. They they said maybe we need to do a feature film instead of a documentary. Maybe we need to create something to create a understanding of what this is before we do a documentary, because otherwise we're going to be speaking to the choir. And that's what most of our work has done. It, of course, all of us with parents or in the profession or watching it, but mom might not be, or Uncle Sally might not be. And I wanted to reach the world. I wanted to reach society. And and I was not even a part of that. I was part of the conversation and thinking, yeah, that's a good idea, totally naive. And one of my old customers that started with me in 1976, so it tells you how much older I am, because I had a business. I was working at that point in graphic arts and did work with him, and he and I stayed friends for that whole
50 years.
50-year season. Yeah. In fact, I talked to him yesterday. He told Joel and Justin, you've got the writer, you've got the book, you've got the story. The Whitest Wall is the story. And so Justin and Joel read the Whitest Wall, and they thought about it. And they thought, with all that went on in Minneapolis and all that's happened in the United States, race and creed are not two we want to deal with right now. I mean, I don't think that's the right venue.
It's too close to the flashpoints.
Yeah, and it's just not, it's like it almost then became trite, where in 2008, 2009, 2010, it wasn't trite at all. It was right on the edge of reality that nobody knew. So, which is what Zak is now. And they said, Joe, and so I told them about my book, and he said, they asked me if I'd consider writing it on 20 year later, or writing another book and picking a different venue. And I chose neurodiversity. And neurodiversity in that case were veterans with post-traumatic stress, level 1 autism, which used to be called Asperger's, ADHD kiddo that probably has FASD but manifests as ADHD, and then an undiagnosed person with FASD. And then in the community, more people with these issues that you come to figure out once you're able to put the pieces together, and you already love the characters, and it's like, oh, I bet. And the bet is probably right. So I started writing because Lizzie, well, when I started writing in 2023, yeah, 2023, I started writing it. And she had been in a car accident, which was just 16-year-old texting, ran a red light. Anyway, so on top of everything she was dealing with having gone blind and recovering from the situation. And we didn't leave her from 2022 until her death in 2024 in July. Sam and I did not leave her. We did not leave her alone with the medical profession, with any appointment. We were 100% on that guard list. And because we learned we had to. Originally, I just let her be, and she's a woman and she could take care of herself. It's a medical field, right? Until things happen that it said, no, we need to have somebody that's clear-headed, monitoring every single detail. And then, yeah, that passive mother changed. So I wrote while she slept. I wrote while she healed. I wrote while she rested, and then it was written, but then come the beginning of 2024, because they wanted to make a feature film of it, right? I ended up pairing back with Deb Evanson, asking her if she could help me edit and kind of give me ideas. And then Antonia Rathburn Lindsay, could she help me? And then I don't know exactly how we came together, Patty, but it was like probably on a podcast for the FASD film that we were doing the documentary. I don't know where we started, but
I don't know. Was it the episode for the FASD dogs with Don?
No,
Was
I think it was before. Oh, it could have been FASD
or was
dog.
it before that?
It might have been with Joel. Anyway, but I'm around, right? I'm, in the FASD community and people can find me and that's just part of life. And Red Shoes Rock. So it could have been Red Shoes Rock and RJ. I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, the Meliorist team, which is the four of us, worked really hard to get this done. And Marcia Chambers was working as my editor, and everybody just really put forth their expertise and love to create these characters. I mean, Marcia created. She said, we need a really good teacher, and I said, well, why don't you create him for me? And she's like, really? I said, yeah, create the person and we'll write him into the book as a teacher. Well, she created John Mason, and I've had notes saying, oh, we need a John Mason in every school. Well, Marcia's background was teaching for 40 years. So,
Yeah.
she knew what we needed and then and she developed his character, and he is, I think he of all the characters, he's the only one that you get an idea of partially of who he is.
Mhm.
You get a vision of him. You don't get eyes or hair color or any of that, but you get a vision of the body type and the, you know, kind of his personality in a different way. So, but it worked perfectly, and I'm sure if we do any future books, John will be a main part of them because he's definitely beloved.
He is. He is.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I I would be lying, and I know you will. You follow God and what God has for His plans for your life, what He wants you to be involved in, and I'm very thankful that you are a dedicated servant. But I will not at all be disappointed if His plan includes many more pieces.
Again, I'm not going to start. I've learned that I take my Jodee out and I walk that narrow road, and if I start getting off, I get nudged. And seriously, I don't like the nudging. I would
Yeah.
rather
But if
just
you become the next, James Patterson, I'm not going to complain.
wouldn't that be a surprise? Oh my goodness. Well, the next step will be getting it into libraries. I think that's what it needs to go into places where people can get it. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for this delightful, delightful conversation. I'm really looking forward to our next Team Meliorist episode where we, take a topic that is a central piece of supporting someone with FASD and kick it around and see, what our various perspectives have to say about it. So I'm really looking forward to that. But you mentioned a little bit of a teaser at the beginning of our conversation when you were talking about your book of poetry.
Oh yeah, that's right. That we're going to work on. We have to
Uh-huh.
leave all
Uh-huh.
those aside. I've got two projects that I am working on for myself and for Patty, and using reopening up the gate of adult children with alcoholics, and that's not the right words anymore. So adult children of alcohol use disorder would
Yeah.
be the way we would say it.
Yeah.
So new language, new style,
Yeah.
no finger pointing, first person. Yeah, we can do this.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I want to do to finish up the four books on FASD caregiving, starting from Liz's book through her teen transition, her horrible teen transition, crazy to adult, and then her medical journey, which is this one right here.
Mhm.
Um, but that whole piece, I'm going to finish it up as a caregiver's guide, and probably small, like the original books. So the two books in the middle are bigger, but yeah, the finishing it up for caregivers to just be able to pick up a page and read. And that's really hard because I remember in times where life was so tough that
Mhm.
to even sometimes read a paragraph was all I could do to do some self-care. And yeah, I've been there. I've been there, and I want to give that back, and we'll see what happens next. So, Patty, I just want to thank you for letting me share this, and yeah, for being friends, and for being for being the kind of friend that's not afraid to say no, that's being the kind of friend that's not afraid to say, hey, you need a break. for being the friend that say, "Hey, your husband just got home. You pay attention to him. Bye."
Yeah.
Those
Yeah,
are
we do that for each other.
yeah, yeah. And I think that's important. It's
It is.
important for any of us that are doing really hard work to have those kind of friendships where,
And I think that's one of the pitfalls we can fall into with FASD is to really pigeonhole ourselves and to really kind of go at something in an obsessive way, right? Where we're going to make a difference, we're going to chase this down, we're going to, stay at it until it's done. And so we've learned that about ourselves, that we're vulnerable to that, and be willing to, you know, remind each other this is just a sliver of life.
yeah, don't let go. Let go. Take your hand out of that cookie jar
Yeah,
and go do something else. Yeah.
yeah. So I treasure our friendship as well. And it with the meliorists, apart from the meliorists, I'm just ever so grateful. But I thank you for the time today being on Living with FASD and learning more about your writing journey and sharing that with the world. Writing a book was one of the furthest things from, I never would have seen that happening. And, anyone can do this. You
Yeah.
know,
There are ways.
we have living experience, which is very valuable, and people with only academic knowledge, they're just not going to get.
Yeah.
And that's a point we've kind of danced around a couple times today in our conversation. And it was something that Key Warner highlighted in her comments, that are in her comment section at the front of Sip by Sip, that at a international conference in Canada years back, someone said to her, we've known the facts about FASD for decades. It's the stories, the experiences that will teach people, that will open the doors, that will make a difference. And that's true. And that's true. So I would encourage people to, if you have something that nothing about us without us, if you've got input, make it work, bring it out, highlight it. So, and this podcast is part of that. So, well, my friend, until next time, thanks for joining me on Living with FASD. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Living with FASD, Candid Conversations with Patty Casper. Feel free to send comments, questions, and topics you'd like to learn more about, hear more about, to me at livingwithfasdpodcast@gmail.com. Please remember to like, follow, and share this podcast on whatever platform you use so that more people can find the podcast. Have a blessed week, everyone, and tune in next Monday for another candid conversation on Living with FASD.